Hello and welcome back to the port. I'm the Gap Major and this is Amity Reports. Amity Reports is your gameplay submissions with my commentary, and today we have a submission from Eternal Abyss, who is playing in the Tier 6 French premium destroyer Le Terre. Now this is a Tier 5 and 6 game of domination on Crash Zone. On the enemy team we have a Gaidi, Shiratsuyu, a Benham, an Isabel, a Dunkirk, a Gneisenauer, KG5, a Hood in a division with a Rugio. So, having looked at the enemy team, any comments? Well, there's no cruisers, which is good news for a destroyer. Out of their destroyers, only really the Gaidi could be a concern because she has smoke and sonar. The Benham will be quite average, I guess you could say. The Shiratsuyu might come with a torpedo reload booster if she doesn't have smoke. In regards to the battleships, interesting, I guess maybe the Hood could be of interest because she does have sonar and she will be quite quick. However, you should be able to outrun her quite easily. Gneisenauer, obviously secondaries. Apart from that, it's really not much else to really mention. Maybe the KG5 could hit you quite hard if you get too close. Friendly team-wise, we have a Mahan, a Minsk, a Le Terre, a Normandy, a Wolfspite, a Snop, a Scharnhorst, a Nelson, and a Ranger. Obviously, Eternal is playing in the Le Terre. Interesting to note, it's a carrier game. He's been rather brave, he's blitzed up the centre, and he's actually cracking on with the capping, which is obviously good to see. A bit risky in the carrier game. Why do I say that? Well, obviously, as soon as you start capping and domination, you give an idea to the carrier whereabouts the destroyers are, and therefore it gives the carrier the opportunity to fly over and do some spotting. In this situation, if he was spotted, he'd probably come under fire from the KG5, which would be the biggest issue, but obviously it could give the enemy destroyers an opportunity to close in him. Activating his engine boost, as you'll see with the Le Terre, she doesn't come with many tricks up her sleeves, not many gimmicks. She's got the damage control party, so does everyone else, and she's got an engine boost, which is slightly better than the usual. It's the typical French engine boost, so it will add, I think it's like 12% speed or something along those lines. So it will give you a bit of a boost, I guess you could say. Working over the enemy Gaidi, spotting the enemy Shiratsuyu over there as well. So potentially could be lining up ourselves for a two-course meal here. Getting ourselves first blood by taking the Gaidi away. And we also capped Bravo, and we're moving on to cap Alpha. Noting the enemy carrier's torpedo aircraft are over here, so that potentially could be a concern if he tries to have a dabble at you. But otherwise, the enemy team, or their battleships really, are quite far away. Therefore, even if you are spotted, the chances of them being able to hit you over this distance is quite slim. Not saying it's impossible. There's a good chance that maybe they could hit you, but their opportunities will be quite probably a short period amount of time, and they got to make sure they've got maybe the right ammunition load and stuff like that. Getting the starboard and the centered line torpedo launchers fired off at the Hood. Another thing to mention with the French destroyers is quite often that they have wing launchers as well as a center line. So in this case, he's got a torpedo launcher on his starboard side, a torpedo launcher on his port side, and he's also got one on the center line. Not sure who laid this smoke screen. I suspect it's a friendly smoke screen. Well, it looks like we're going to be capping the Alpha cap on our own as well, which is quite nice. Torpedoes out on the Hood are also looking quite good too. So yeah, talking about those torpedo launchers and the way they're positioned, it does mean that sometimes you end up doing what they call the French flip. You'll fire your center line and one of your side launchers, and then you'll quickly flip the ship and you'll fire off the launcher from the other side. And usually, if you're sailing the ship in circles, what you'll find is usually by the time you've completed the circle, the launchers that you fired first will be ready again. Spoiled by the Shiratsuyu, that's two launchers of torpedoes coming past, which is a little scary, but that means the Shiratsuyu has fired her torpedoes. She is returning fire, so we have a Japanese destroyer that will try and use its guns, which is going to be interesting. Now the question is, does she have smoke or does she have torpedo reload booster? Now she's not using smoke and she's not shooting anymore. And her engines are not up. She's damaged counter engines. This is quite interesting. But you're seeing that the guns in the turbo are hitting very hard. The reason being is they are 5.5-inch guns. You also note the very wide stance he's having to put his ship into in order to use all of his guns. That's obviously one of the downsides of the French destroyers. Their broad stance does make them a big target. So it means if you're engaging against something, sometimes you're kiting and out, allowing you to narrow your profile where your guns are reloading, very much like a cruiser would. But yeah, those 5.5-inch guns do hit very hard. It does mean that obviously you can really rack it up against a destroyer quite nicely, but also against light cruisers. If you close into close ranges, you can really start chewing up light cruisers, especially with the armor piercing if they're broadside on. Which is very much the purpose behind the design. The whole point of the design with the 5.5-inch guns was to counter the Italian light cruisers. I'm gonna give it a go at pronouncing it. I can't even pronounce. But the Condottieri class cruisers, examples of the ships of that class which are in the game. Well, obviously we have the Gisano, which is down at tier 3, I believe. Montecuccoli, which is at tier 4. We also have the Duca d'Aosta, which is a tier 5 premium, I believe, and the Abruzzi as well, which I think is also a tier 5 premium. I might not be completely correct there, but that's just an examples of those class. So obviously the Italians had these fast 6-inch gun cruisers, which were lightly armoured, and so the French obviously wanted to try and counter these fast cruiser designs, but rather than building cruisers themselves, they decided to try and make baby cruisers, or destroyers in this case. So we end up with the Le Terrible and their sister Le Fantasque. As I've probably not already mentioned, but the Terrible is basically a Le Fantasque class destroyer. Now, obviously we've covered off the purpose behind them. I'm not really sure if they actually ever ended up serving in that purpose. And this looks like a nice potential example of a French flip. He's fired off the port launcher and he's firing off the starboard launcher. Obviously the wing launchers have like quite a nice forward facing angle, whereas the centerline launcher has like a central kind of angle. So you do have to take that into account when you do use the torpedoes. But the Ismail's turned away after Eternal got spotted by the aircraft. But amusingly, the aircraft, rather than continuing to hover over him and putting him under pressure, have simply just moved on to the next target, which I guess it's some of the issues that are with carriers at the moment. Carriers don't really get enough points for spotting and spotting damage, and therefore, if you want to get a reasonable amount of points in a carrier, sometimes you have to give up on the spotting and press on for the damage, which of course makes it a bit of a downside, because I'd rather the carriers were a support class which got rewarded for supporting ships rather than a damage dealing class which was supported for doing damage. It means that the carriers end up having to take quite a rather selfish gameplay at the moment in order to actually make sure they get some XP out at the end of the game. Anyway, that's enough of me complaining about that. So yeah, the Terrible, she's obviously served in World War II. In fact, she served all the way throughout. She was commissioned in 1935 and she was decommissioned in 1955, so she definitely served all the way through. At the start of the Second World War, she's all over the place is the best way to put it. She's basically assisting in the hunt for the Graf Spee and protecting convoys from her. She's also escorting the Strasbourg and the British carrier Hermes, also escorting the Dunkirk when the Dunkirk was sailing for Canada with a shipment of gold. So it's quite interesting there. She was also based at Mers El Kabir in preparation for Italy joining the war, but then she ended up racing up north to Brest when the Germans invaded Norway, and she also was at Mers El Kabir when it was attacked by the British following the Vichy French government establishment, I guess you could say. Interesting, just going to skip the history here for a second. He's fired his port and his centerline launcher on the Rugio and his starboard launcher on the Ismail. He's managed to get himself into this very sneaky situation here where he's between two enemy ships and ironically not being spotted by the aircraft because the aircraft is just way off. And he's got his engine boost on, so what he's done is really brought his detectability circle right down so he can just about fit in here, getting a devastating strike on the Rugio. Unfortunately, it looks like those torpedoes on the starboard side are just a little bit too slow to get you a double strike. However, there's kill number 4 and we can't complain about that. So, yes, jumping back, obviously she then continued her service with the French Navy under the Vichy French government, where she went for a bit of a refit and then she got posted to Dakar after one of her sisters was sunk there by the British during the basically the Battle of Dakar. That was basically a British attempt to, I believe, to persuade the French garrison there to join the Free French Forces, and I think the Free French Forces were actually present there as well. So this is a amusing situation where you had the French on both sides of the battle, and it's also the French at Dakar were very close to actually capitulating and basically handing themselves over to the Free French when the British Navy sailed away. It's a very amusing situation. It's worth a good read if you're interested in that kind of stuff. And then following the American invasion of Morocco, Algeria, which was then followed by the German invasion of Vichy France, she then converted over to the Allies, serving with the Free French. She was transferred to the United States, where she had quite a large anti-aircraft upgrade, and she also had a technology upgrade. She was fitted with sonar and radar, which is quite nice. Now, for the rest of the war, she serves in some very not minor, but like little known battles here and there. She serves in the Mediterranean mostly, countering German convoys and Italian vessels here and there. So it's interesting, but there's nothing big, unfortunately, there. And towards the end of the war, she actually ends up accidentally colliding with a fellow French destroyer, in which leaves about 27 meters of her hull length completely damaged, which also flooded her engines and her boiler rooms. There was a loss of life during this event, unfortunately. Post-war, she continued to serve the French Navy until she was decommissioned in 1949, I believe. She was transferred to the reserve fleet in 1950. She was reclassified as an escort destroyer and then as a fast destroyer. She continued to be in reserve, I guess you could say, occasionally coming out for a little bit of service here and there until 1955, where she was then switched to being a stationary training ship for the Naval Academy. Unfortunately, she was stricken in 1962, I should say, and scrapped in 1963, which I think is a bit of a shame, because the Turbo does have a nice little claim to fame. She set the world record for a ship with a conventional hull for basically being quite fast, very fast. In fact, she was doing 45.02 knots when she was recorded during this. So it's a shame that Le Turbo wasn't preserved. She was... It's a shame. It's one of those things where it would be nice to have preserved her. I'm sure France would have probably liked that as well. But unfortunately, time machines haven't been invented yet. Now, this has been a bit cheeky, opening fire on the Gneisenau. However, I'm going to say it's fair game, because the friendly battleship in front of the Gneisenau did request support, and therefore I would take it that they are actively requesting assistance, and therefore Eternal Abyss has simply provided that assistance that was requested, and has been able to secure himself a little cheeky Kraken there. Now, he's being a bit brave here, he admits that, and he's making a bit of a risky end, and he's risking some HP as he rushes the KG-5, getting 2 torpedo hits from his starboard and centerline launcher, launching the port launcher as he's getting a bit of a kick in from the KG-5, but there goes High Caliber. He says it's a bit selfish and a bit risky considering the events. However, he had so much HP and the enemy were in such a position that they could not win. It was kind of like, well, let's have a roll of the dice and see what we can get. Well, here we are at the end screen, and as you can see, he's managed to get himself Kraken Unleashed, First Blood, Devastating Strike, and High Caliber, doing 133,000 damage via 10 torpedo hits and 37 main battery hits, getting himself 2 fires, 7 flooding, and 7 incapacitations, getting 6 kills and 3 solo captures. Going on to the team screen, and he's come top of his team with a total amount of 3,698 ship XP. That's with his 6 kills and all those lovely medals. That's about 1,200-ish ship XP more than the next best player on his team. So all in all, he's been able to do quite well. About 1,500-ish more than the next best player on the enemy team as well, which is quite interesting. Jumping over to the economy screen, and you can see he's been able to walk away with a total profit of 664,000 credits, and that is with a premium count after a ship service cost of 78,000 credits. Obviously, Tier 6 Premium does have an improved credit earning potential and a reduced ship service cost, which is all quite nice. Well, Noy's been able to make a very pretty penny and a very entertaining game. If you did enjoy this amateur reports and the gameplay shown, feel free to give the video a thumbs up. If you enjoy this kind of content, feel free to subscribe, and thank you to all the subscribers. Down in the description is the commander build, the modules, the email address to the channel. If you want to send in any of your own game captures, it would be much obliged, and they'll always, I try and feature as many as I can. I try to mix up who I'm showing as well. Also, link to Patreon if you want to support the channel on Patreon, as it is a non-monetized channel. I've been the Galloping Major, and back to the port.
Hey, hey, clear the way, here comes the Galloping Major. Bumpity, 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 bump. Get out of the way there, you fellows, unless you want me to run you down. I guess this is the life. Now, hey, hey, clear the way, here comes the Galloping Major.